The biggest news, obviously, from last Thursday with Mike Shildt being fired, and you had the press conference with John Mozeliak and Bill DeWitt Jr., and then Mike Shildt had his statement a couple days ago. Just how shocked were you at this development, and what do you think happened, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, shocked is a pretty good word. I remember I was, it was my first day back from Atlanta. It was my first day off, my first official off-season off day, and then started to get a few texts from Jeff Jones and Katie Rue that, do you guys get the press conference coming up? I was like, there's a press conference coming up? What's going on? So the whole thing was done very bizarrely and just kind of a little hastily done. But, there was rumblings about an extension for Shildt, and then there was all of a sudden that he's been dismissed. And we get on the phone with on the Zoom with Mozeliak, and he explains that there are, quote, philosophical differences, which has become quite the buzzword, and T-shirts are being made, I'm sure. But, it was shocking, to say the least, just given how the season went and how the last three seasons, honestly, have gone, even 3.5 after he took over for Mike Matheny in 2018. So, the last thing you were sort of expecting was a firing, just given how things had gone. And even though the wild card game wasn't a great result nor really a great process, I mean, the fact that they were a swing away from knocking out the 106-win Dodgers or 105-win Dodgers was just a pretty big marvel in of itself. So, but Mozeliak thinks he's got someone that he wants for the job, and sort of what we've been led to believe without much really public discussion is that there's just some falling out. He says things came to a head over the last couple of weeks between him and Mike Shildt. We know there was a meeting between the staff and the front office over the last 2 weeks or so, and Mozeliak said that over the past 3 or 5 days before the press conference started, things kind of hit ahead, and maybe things had maybe been brought to his attention over the season. Totally baseball related, but it just seemed like there was not a meeting of the minds, as he said, and that he wanted to go in a different direction.
Yeah, and in trying to read everything about this and talk to as many people as I can, I wonder, we talk about Jeff Albert and the hitting philosophy, and throughout this year, we heard about the fact, and Mike Shildt said this many times, that when they were really struggling in June, they basically had a meeting. You had the Tommy Edman comments there about being unprepared. From what you know and have reported and heard, do we know exactly, did the Cardinals get away from a Jeff Albert approach for a while and then get back to it? Because I've also read that potentially a rededication to Jeff Albert's philosophy, let's say around September when they got hot, and a lot of the players like Jeff Albert. So what do you know about that situation with Jeff Albert and Mike Shildt and what could have happened?
Yeah, and that's something that I guess, I'd have to do a little more research on, just how their hitting approach sort of evolved over the course of the season. Obviously there wasn't the hitting wasn't helping, but it was also pitching that was such a big thorn in the side. And, we haven't seen, I've only been around Mike Shildt for this season. And I've heard of Tony La Russa's, not antics, but tendencies and press conference to really levy the front office. And, Mike maybe made some comments in that end as far as he's working with what he has, but he never really went out of his sorts to really go, too outwardly lobbying for any sort of change. He said, I'm working with what I have, and we're going to do with what we have. And maybe that was a little passive aggressive, but he was always pretty forthcoming and wasn't going to speak ill of anyone publicly. As far as just Jeff Albert, Ben Fredrickson asked Mozeliak about if the differences between Shildt and Albert were part of reason. He said, and Mozeliak responded that it wasn't the sole reason. So there definitely was some sort of tension building there that seems to have played not a non-zero factor in the reason that Shildt and the organization have parted ways. There was certainly, Jeff Albert was certainly the one who was kind of on the hot seat and sort of under a closer microscope. I personally don't know if the surge in September and August really was a rededication to Albert or a divorce from Albert's tendencies and planning, but that was just the weird part of the entire messaging, is how well they did and how much it seemed like Shildt kept that clubhouse together, and then to sort of cut ties. It's one thing if they didn't make the playoffs. It's one thing if they floundered out. But, they put their best foot forward and turned around a season that wasn't really destined to do what they did.
We're talking with Zach Silver from MLB.com, the Cardinals beat writer for MLB.com. So obviously the next question is, who will be the next manager? And you have some really strong internal candidates with Stubby Clapp and Ollie Marmol. So what do you think? What are you hearing? Do you think there's a very good chance that the Cardinals stay in-house with their kind of organizational philosophy, with their in-house guys? You're talking about some external candidates, but even some of those guys, like a Skip Schumacher, have Cardinals background. So who do you think, if you had to kind of lay odds, will be the Cardinals' next manager?
Yeah, if I was a betting man, which I'm not really, then I would probably put my chips into the Oliver Marmol, the Ollie Marmol bucket. Just the language that's been used, even Shildt in his farewell statement the other day, paid explicit respect to Ollie, and granted that's someone he's known for a long time, someone he scouted when he was a scout. So that may just be Shildt, paying a close friend the best of luck, but he has known other guys on his staff, and he didn't isolate them out as much as he did Ollie. And who knows if that's reading to tea leaves too much of him, giving Ollie his blessing or whatnot. But sort of the way they've gone about Ollie's career, in that he's been a bench coach, as the second youngest bench coach in right now. He would be the youngest manager if he is selected. So that is maybe the one place of pause, where you go from someone like Mike Shildt, who had never managed in the big leagues before, to someone now who also hasn't managed in the big leagues before. But I personally can't see them going out of house unless it's for someone like Skip Schumacher, because if the reason that Shildt didn't work was that there wasn't a meeting of the minds, then I can't see them going for a Bruce Bochy or a Buck Showalter, or someone who's been proven and someone who has extensive experience, and someone who's going to want to keep their pulse on the team and keep their finger on the scale a little bit more. I think the front office is going to go with someone they know, and they're going to go with someone who's been around, if not in a coaching role right now, at least someone who's been around the organization. So I really think Stubby, Ollie, and Skip Schumacher are the three leading candidates. And if I had to choose, I'd say Ollie is probably the number one candidate that they have in mind.
And Zach, you're from Maryland originally, right?
Yep, you got that right.
Okay, so your first year covering the Cardinals on the beat, you're obviously a baseball guy, a baseball fan. Give me your perspective. What did you think of the Cardinals and St. Louis and just the Cardinal way and all that, growing up, from afar, and then now spending a year covering the Cardinals, living in St. Louis? Anything surprise you?
Well, it was always, what I'd known about the Cardinals was always Cardinal devil magic, and I remember. It's funny. I've had some conversations around the press box about the 2012 NLDS. I think of that. I grew up around the Nationals in D.C., living in that area. I think of the 2012 Game 5 of the NLDS as the Drew Storen game, because obviously he was the pitcher on the mound who blew the lead and blew the season. Around St. Louis, that's the Pete Cosma game, which it's just crazy how that the two the two duality of man, how one person looks at it and the other person looks at it. So,
what do you think the Cardinals will do and should do this offseason as they try to make it from a 90-ish win team the last 3 years to push to be a division winner, 95 plus, and potentially have deeper runs in the postseason?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
What I think they will do and what they should do are two very different things. I think you really need another bat. I think you need a lefty. You need a lefty in this lineup, because Dylan and Tommy obviously are switch hitters, but unless you have Lars Nootbaar as your everyday DH, which I just don't think is the goal or the hope, then you really need some lefty to break up this lineup. I mean, Paul, Tyler, Nolan is a great 2-3-4. I think they should go for a left-handed bat. I'm not sure they will. Obviously, Corey Seager would fit both those bills as far as a shortstop upgrade as well. I think they will add a pitcher, because they only have 4 starters and Miles. And they have, Jake Woodford, who could compete for a spot, and Johan Oviedo and Alex Reyes. But I think they really do need a left-handed starter as well. So I guess lefties is where I think they should go, and I could see them more adding a depth pitcher than, maybe when's the last time they signed a big contract in Matt Holliday in 2008, 2009. So unless they decide they want to do that when they have Nolan's money now on the books, I see them making a few more modest upgrades, because I think the hope is they're healthy this year and that the health kind of plays a bigger factor, not this June lull that we saw last year.
Well, Zach, appreciate the time as always, sir. Enjoy your vacation. Hopefully there won't be any more news, although, there's going to be an announcement pretty soon here for the next Cardinals manager. But thanks for joining us. You're welcome anytime, and good talking baseball with you.
Yeah, no, waiting on Pins and Needles for that. Thanks a lot for having me.
All right, thank you. That's Zach Silver, Cardinals beat writer for MLB.com.
You asked that question, what do you do? Well, you on improving to get to 95 to 100? Well, you just use more analytics. That's the thought process there. I'm not saying I agree with it, but that's what the Cardinals are thinking. There's no doubt about that.
Analytics always helps, but also let's get some really good players that can use the analytics and hit some home runs and strike some dudes out. And don't you think also, to me, the Cardinals roster, even though towards the end of the season, look, we all said this. When they were on the 17-game win streak and they get to the National League wildcard game, all right, the Dodgers are really, really good. But if you get past that, the way the Cardinals were playing and how weird the postseason has been, yeah, the Cardinals, they did have a shot. But then when you also compare rosters, they're not that close to some of these teams that will likely get to the World Series and win the World Series. And that's not to say the Cardinals aren't a good team. They're always a good team. But we saw some great Cardinal teams, 2011, 2015, and I never thought the Cardinals the last 3 years, even though they made the playoffs all 3 of those years, Jim, they never felt like those elite Cardinal teams that really had a chance to win the World Series. Now, of course, you know that if they get in and if they get hot, and to quote Doug Vaughn, you can win this baby. But the last 3 years, did any of those Cardinal teams really feel elite to you?
No, I agree with you on that. They absolutely did not. Even when you get to the championship series with Washington, and the reality is if you had a guy that could hit it all, you might swing that series the other way because you just got zero offense. We had good pitching. The other side got better pitching. I mean, it was like almost three consecutive no-hitters through 6 innings at one point during that series against the Cardinals. But I'll throw this out there, and I agree with you on that because I do not think the Cardinals at any time you go, well, they're elite and a favorite to run off the Dodgers or somebody. But if this Cardinal team won against the Dodgers, you wouldn't think, well, they can't beat that Giants team. I mean, we all felt that way, right? I know I did. It was like, Giants, they're good, but they don't scare me like that Dodgers team does. And then the flip side, Atlanta right now, they're up 2-1. But even record-wise, the Cardinals were better than the Atlanta Braves. And you don't go, oh, those Braves, man, you can't beat them. But the Braves, we'll see what happens after last night's fiasco and late in the game if they collapse again like they've done. But, again, you got to get in to get the opportunity. It's not a argument that we like here in St. Louis because we hear that too much from the front office. And there are times you go, if you would have made one more addition, you would have put yourself in a lot better position. You wouldn't be playing in that one-game wild card. You'd be sitting there with an opportunity to take 3 of 5 to advance instead of taking your chances and losing on the final at bat.
Right, and every year's different, too. Even go back to 2019, a lot of the discussion was you needed pitching. I thought they should grab, you had Zach Wheeler, for example, at that time, and you thought maybe, is that the type of guy then you could re-sign? But when you hear that the Harrison Baders and potentially Tyler O'Neills of the world were on the table to make a deal like that. And look, before this year, you're probably saying, hey, trade those guys. Well, now you're glad they didn't trade. Yeah. Certainly Tyler O'Neill. And even I think people are coming around on Harrison Bader. Now, will he be an all-star center fielder? I don't know. He has a really high ceiling. He's more volatile offensively, but he's always going to run. He's always going to play defense. So you have that going for you. Yeah, I just think you can't make these grandiose statements, especially with the Cardinals, because we've been burned so many times. We say, they're not that good. They're done. They find a way to get in. And yes, I agree with you. I think the Cardinals are better than the Braves. And look, up until the 8th inning yesterday, you're looking at, can the Braves actually sweep the LA Dodgers? Yep. And that's where the postseason is weird. Year in and year out, you have to get in first. And then also, when I'm evaluating the Cardinals roster, I'd like to get your opinion on this as well, Jim, and the text line 855-282-8255 as we wrap up the final 5 minutes or so of this program. When I look at the Cardinals in 2021, I do think there was tons of injuries we know, especially in the starting rotation. I can understand, even if you thought they should have gotten another starter, a proven guy. I get that. But if you look at some of the names, I understand why they thought they were okay entering the season arms-wise. I don't think you can usually prepare for a season where you lose Flaherty and Michaelis and Carlos Martinez for a while and Daniel Ponce de Leon, Jack Flaherty. Adam Wainwright was really the only starter that pitched the whole season long. You knew that Dakota Hudson was not going to be available. Okay, so he was later on in the season. But even from a bullpen standpoint, didn't you expect more from Ryan Helsley? Didn't we expect more from Daniel Ponce de Leon? Even if you said, you know what, I never thought Carlos Martinez was going to be a starter. I think you could have assumed, okay, maybe he gives you some type of positive production out of the bullpen. So again, I understand if you disagree with me, but I understand why the Cardinals entered 2021 feeling pretty good about arms. Position player-wise, when Harrison Bader and Tyler O'Neill were hurt, they were starting guys that didn't belong in the big leagues. And even at the end of the season, Jim, when the lineup was rocking and rolling, there was absolutely no depth. There was no depth on the bench whatsoever. So to me, that's where they have to get better.
Absolutely better on the bench. Look, Scotty Hurst, no. Sorry, but that's where
Justin Williams.
Yeah, Justin Williams. I think the ship has sailed based on giving his opportunity in the minors this year. 100%. And by the way, Austin Dean was a failure, organizational wise. Oh, we're going to rely on him. No, you're not. That was a bad move. Arms. I'll say this about arms, and I'm not belittling what you said, but you never
don't
have
you
enough.
dare.
You never have enough.
No, you're right.
You can tell me, oh, well, where are we going to find? You'll find it. Trust me, you'll find a way. You'll find a use for another guy. I would have liked to seen one more veteran arm, but even at that being said, they needed 2 or 3 more arms this year, and they had the whole list that you ran through should have contributed at some point. If you're really looking at your organizational table, you go, look at all these guys. A handful of these guys are going to help out for sure, and for the most part, they didn't. I mean, you went through Oviedo, you went through some of those names, and you went, oh, nope. I mean, it's hard to have that many guys not help. Even Carlos, being Carlos, you go, he can help out. He's healthy. He's got a healthy arm, right? He should be able to plug in somewhere and help with any. He couldn't even do that, and then the thumb happened, and that whole scenario. But you never have enough arms. I would say that, but there was a lot of options, and they all failed.
That's where I think when you look back, and it's not hindsight, because clearly there were a lot of injuries, but look at the last several years, you really liked your depth when your, let's say, 6th, 7th, 8th starter that you needed in a pinch, if those guys were Austin Gomber or John Gant or Daniel Ponce de Leon, you felt really good. Again, we're talking about a couple injuries to give those guys a start in the rotation, a spot start. Whereas this year, you were depending on John Gant.
Yeah.
You were depending on John Gant for the first third of the season to be one of your 5 starters. You traded away Austin Gomber. Daniel Ponce de Leon, who I always thought was a nice swing guy in terms of he give you length, he did not perform like he did, especially his rookie year. And then in the minors, you didn't have guys in AAA really pushing that deserved to be in the big leagues, like a Johan Oviedo. He did everything he could, but he wasn't ready. Even Jake Woodford, better at the end of the season after he got some more seasoning, but for a while there, when your season was absolutely cratering in June, you were handing the ball to Gant and to Oviedo and to sometimes Jake Woodford, and those guys were not ready to be, they either weren't ready or at that point in their careers should not have been big league everyday starters.
That was a failure on the organization not to, put more depth there. There's no doubt about that. And I'll also throw out one more name because we all forget about him. They messed up Jordan Hicks.
Mm-hmm.
The handling of Jordan Hicks has been a disaster from the get-go. And he was going to be the closer. Give him about a month. We'll get him back up to speed. He'll be the closer, and everybody else just drops, one level down. Heck, we might have Reyes as a seventh inning guy. That did not work, and they couldn't have handled that thing any worse than the way it's played itself out. He's now pitching down in the Arizona Fall League, and he pitched a couple innings. I think the last time out, he may have pitched since then. He wasn't overwhelming. I mean, they're still trying to figure out what's going on with him. So he's got an arm, okay, but he can't get anybody out. That doesn't help anybody. They mishandled that one.
And Helsley's another guy that you just expected more from. When you were talking about late inning, high leverage guys, potentially a closer. We've talked about Ryan Helsley to be a potential closer for a couple years there, and this season that did not work out.